A very good evening, dear students. Welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy daily current affairs analysis session. And in this session, we have some important topics from different newspapers. So one by one, we'll try to discuss all these important articles in a very detailed manner. Right. So this discussion will be helpful for your upcoming examinations, particularly for prelims and mains examination, because it gives you an opportunity to further widen the existing knowledge base, and you will also be up to date with the regular current affairs which are taking place. And the first topic with which we are going to start this discussion is about India and Bangladesh transshipment facility. And we knew that if you carefully look into the India and Bangladesh relationship, so it is altogether like a roller coaster ride. Particularly after the regime change in Bangladesh under the interim government chief advisor Muhammad Yunus. So after he became the chief advisor of Bangladesh for the interim government, so what happened was there is a growing anti-India sentiment in Bangladesh. So recently, Muhammad Yunus paid an official visit to China, and in this official visit to China, Muhammad Yunus made some remarks on the northeastern part of India, that saying that it is a landlocked country, and he also invited China to play a larger role in the region, particularly the Bay of Bengal region. So therefore, in this context, the Indian government's move to end this transshipment facility for Bangladesh is being seen as a retaliatory move, or it is also considered as a tit for tat or a reactionary move from the Indian government. Now, one thing that we should understand is that during Sheikh Hasina's regime, India and Bangladesh have maintained very close and friendly relations. However, after Sheikh Hasina was overthrown by the students' movement, and then the interim government was formed under the chief economic advisor Mr. Muhammad Yunus, relationship started coming down. Right. So in this context, we'll understand so what is the state of India and Bangladesh relationship, because in recent times, so you can clearly see that there is an anti-India sentiment that has been growing in Bangladesh. And similarly, Bangladesh appeared to be growing its closeness or growing its ties with both China and Pakistan. And similarly, there are radical elements in Bangladesh that may pose threat to India's internal security as well, along with the illegal immigration into India's northeastern. So overall, it is very clear that there is a growing anti-India sentiment within Bangladesh, and that has led to a series of movements by this interim government headed by Mr. Muhammad Yunus, and those moves are being considered as anti-India moves. So that could have the potential to threaten India's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Now, one thing that we should understand here is that there's a corridor called a Chicken Neck corridor or a Siliguri corridor. So this is a very narrow corridor, right? So this is the only land route to access India's northeastern part of India. So in this backdrop, Mr. Muhammad Yunus made remarks when he paid an official visit to China that the northeastern part of India is largely a landlocked region, and China could actually come in and it can actually play a larger role in the region. So after these remarks made by the interim government's chief economic advisor, the Indian government has immediately decided to end this transshipment facility that has been earlier provided to the Bangladesh. So under transshipment facility, what generally happens is that Bangladesh can actually ship its goods to this transshipment facility, and from the transshipment facility, those goods would be distributed to the different countries from India using existing Indian infrastructure. However, Bangladesh as of now don't have that kind of a significant infrastructure to ship goods into the other countries. However, as of now, they have been using India's infrastructure to ship goods to different parts of the world, thereby significantly enhancing their forex for the foreign trade with the other countries across the world. Now we are going to understand what is this transshipment facility and how this move is going to impact both India and Bangladesh. So what should be the way forward? We'll try to understand this in a very detailed manner, and this is very important in the backdrop of both India and Bangladesh relationship. So the context I have already discussed, that this transshipment facility between India and Bangladesh was signed in the year 2020, because in 2020 in Bangladesh, Sheikh Hasina was in power. So Sheikh Hasina belonged to Awami League. So she belongs to Awami League and she was in power in 2020, and when she was in power there were a number of agreements which mutually benefited both India and Bangladesh. So both India and Bangladesh have signed this transshipment facility in 2020, and thereby it actually allowed the use of Indian territory for third country exports. For example, imagine that Bangladesh wanted to export goods to US. So in case Bangladesh lacks the necessary infrastructure to export goods to US, then Indian territory can be used by Bangladesh. So Indian territory can be used by Bangladesh to export goods to US. So thereby it exports to countries like US can be substantially improved. So it is not just with respect to US and with respect to European Union and any other country in the world. So Bangladesh can actually use Indian territory to export its goods to countries like US, because Bangladesh as of now not lacking the necessary infrastructure for the export of these shipments. However, it is expected that this move from India, that ending or terminating this transshipment facility to Bangladesh, it was signed in the year 2020. You just have to remember this. So it was signed in the year 2020, and this particular move from the Indian government is considered as a significant because it is going to have implications for both bilateral trade and the trade of Bangladesh, as well as the diplomatic relations between both India and Bangladesh, because Bangladesh as of now significantly relied on India for the transshipment or shipment of its goods to the global markets, and that's why it is going to impact Bangladesh trade, as well as it is going to have implications for the diplomatic relations between both India and Bangladesh. Now we'll understand what is the transshipment process and how it actually takes place. Now transshipment process takes place in number of steps. First, a consignment is shipped from the country of origin. So imagine that the country of origin in this case is Bangladesh. So the consignment would be shifted to the country of origin, so shipped from the country of origin. So once it is shipped, the consignment, then it will be shipped to the transshipment facility. So there will be a transshipment facility. So this transshipment facility is located in India, and once the consignment reached to the transshipment facility, so consignment arrives to the transshipment facility that is located in India, then the consignment is then shipped to the port of destination. Imagine that consignment is going to be shipped to US, and then this consignment will be shipped to the port of destination, and ultimately this consignment will arrive at the port of destination, right? So this is how transshipment process usually works. However, India has decided to terminate Bangladesh using its territory, its infrastructure as a transshipment facility to export its goods to the third party countries, and that is the decision that India has been taken. Now we'll understand in a more detailed manner what is India and Bangladesh transshipment facility. And in fact, we have already discussed, we have already understood that India has actually allowed its territory for Bangladesh to use its land customs stations. So land customs stations. So we have several land customs stations in India, and Bangladesh can freely use these land customs stations to ship goods to the third party countries. Bangladesh can freely ship its goods to the third party countries using these land customs stations, and that is facilitated by the transshipment agreement between both Bangladesh and India. So in fact, Bangladesh can use India's land custom stations to ship goods to countries like, or export goods to countries like Nepal, Bhutan, and for that matter Myanmar also, right? So in fact, With respect to Bangladesh, we also have interests. What interest that we have with Bangladesh? The first major interest is connectivity to Northeast. So connectivity to Northeast is very, very important. We no longer rely on this narrow Siliguri corridor or Chicken Neck corridor, and connectivity is very important for the holistic and comprehensive development of the entire northeastern part of India. So keeping this in mind, Bangladesh is a very, very important player. And apart from that, there are instances that Prime Minister Narendra Modi previously described Bangladesh as one of the most important partner, one of the most important trading partner for India. And in fact, it is the largest trading partner for India in South Asia. And in fact, the primary objective of this transshipment facility is aimed to reduce the transportation cost for the Bangladesh and also improving logistical efficiency. So ultimately it would result in increasing export competitiveness of Bangladesh, and Bangladesh can also export maximum number of items into the global markets. So this was done when India and Bangladesh were enjoying very good relations. India and Bangladesh were enjoying very good relations. But in 2024, what happened was Sheikh Hasina, and she belongs to Awami League political party, and Sheikh Hasina was overthrown by, or Sheikh Hasina was expelled from the government by the students movement, and then students demanded that there should be an interim government that should be established, and interim government was established in Bangladesh without any elections, right? So still interim government is ruling Bangladesh, and interim government has chief advisor who is Mr. Muhammad Yunus. So Muhammad Yunus was the chief advisor of the interim government in Bangladesh. So after interim government is formed in Bangladesh, what actually happened was there is a sliding down of both India and Bangladesh relations, right? So you can see that there is a roller coaster ride of both India and Bangladesh relations. So several things have happened. For example, so Bangladesh has been started improving its relations with both China and Pakistan. So similarly, there is a rise in anti-India statements from the Bangladeshi political leaders, and there is a rise in radical political parties in Bangladesh, and so all these factors are not good for strengthening bilateral relations between both India and Bangladesh. So that has led to a pessimistic thinking among both these countries. But this recent move by the Indian government has been triggered by Mr. Muhammad Yunus' remarks in China about the northeastern part of India, that is saying that northeastern part of India is a landlocked region. So therefore, coming back to this topic, so implementation scope of this transshipment facility, so that includes cargo which was routed via Indian ports. For example, the cargo that is originated in Bangladesh, it would be actually shipped to either Kolkata or Delhi airports. So from Kolkata or Delhi airports, the cargo would be shifted to or exported to the third party countries. So thereby Bangladesh would be having global access to its exports, and it could potentially benefit the Bangladesh as well, right? So it is one of the reasons that in recent times Bangladesh has seen exponential rise in the total exports of the country, particularly the garments. Particularly the ready-made garments. Bangladesh has seen an enormous increase in the exports to markets like European Union and US, right? So in fact, this also underlines India's support, providing Bangladesh with the transshipment facility. Also underlines India's support when both India and Bangladesh are enjoying very close and friendly relationships. So this is also part of the goodwill gesture from India, thereby enhancing regional trade integration under India's neighborhood policy. Remember that we have neighborhood first policy. Under the neighborhood first policy, we would prioritize all our neighbors, right? So in fact, I would say that Bangladesh is a very important pillar in India's neighborhood first policy. Now we'll understand why India withdraw this transshipment facility to Bangladesh. So what is the reason for withdrawing this transshipment facility to Bangladesh, right? So in fact, There are a lot of domestic industry concerns with respect to India providing this transshipment facility to Bangladeshi exports. Particularly, concern has been expressed by the Apparel Export and Promotion Council, because Indian textiles and Bangladeshi textiles are competing with each other, and when India has been favoring or prioritizing the Bangladeshi textile exports or supporting Bangladeshi textile exports to markets like European Union and US, that certainly impact India's exports to those respective countries. And because of that reason, the Apparel Export and Promotion Council has been very often arguing for withdrawing India's support to this transshipment of Bangladeshi apparel products, particularly the ready-made garments, right? So the reason is competition with Bangladeshi exports. So this could be the one reason that why India has actually withdrawn the transshipment facility to Bangladesh. And second most important reason could be the logistic burden on India. For example, if we have the limited infrastructure, or limited logistics, and that may not be able to cater to the domestic needs, and still we are allowing free access to Bangladeshi exports into our existing facilities, so that would actually constrain domestic exports to foreign countries, right? Because it would result in congestion in areas like in cities like Delhi and Kolkata, so thereby it will impact India's overall exports, and this could be the second most important reason. And apart from that, so the strategic reasons also involved in India's recent move, right? What are the strategic reasons that have actually triggered India's move to terminate Bangladesh from providing this transshipment facility? We have already understood that there is a growing proximity of Bangladesh to both China and Pakistan, and in fact Chinese presence in India's neighborhood is not in the best interest of India. And in recent times we actually see Chinese growing presence in Nepal and Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and for that matter after the changed regime in Bangladesh, so Bangladesh is also growing its proximity with China. And in fact, so as I have already mentioned, that the interim government's chief advisor also made remarks on the northeastern part of India and allowing or inviting China to the northeastern part of India or Bangladesh to play a larger role in the region. So this is the another major reason that has actually triggered the government to adopt this particular move. And in fact, there are some security dimensions also involved here, right? So when we talk about the security dimensions that actually involved here, that Muhammad Yunus had invited Chinese investments near India's Siliguri corridor or Chicken Neck corridor, and there is an airport called or airbase called Lal Monirat airbase. So this Lal Monirat airbase could be likely developed by China very close to this Siliguri corridor or Chicken Neck corridor, and that could potentially have the security implications for India as well in the longer term. And apart from all these different reasons, there are some diplomatic reasons as well. So this is actually considered as a diplomatic message on the part of India, right? Because there is a geopolitical drift away from India by Bangladesh, and Indian government wanted to give Bangladesh a message about its potential implications of Bangladesh geopolitical drift away from India, right? So these are some reasons why India has actually withdrawn the transshipment facility to Bangladesh. And similarly, we'll try to understand the implications of this move on Bangladesh. So what are the implications of this move on Bangladesh? Right, so we'll try to understand the implications of this move, not just on Bangladesh but also India. First we'll try to understand the implications on Bangladesh. Now it could result in trade disruption in Bangladesh, because if Bangladesh wanted to link its economy with the global economy and Bangladesh wanted to export goods to the other countries, then Bangladesh infrastructure, the existing logistical infrastructure, is not sufficient and it is also inadequate, and Bangladesh is actually dependent significantly on India's logistics and infrastructure for the transshipment or shipping goods to the other different countries. So when India terminates this transshipment facility to Bangladesh, so it could potentially disrupt trade of Bangladesh, because it will increase the export costs for Bangladesh, and it would even delay the delivery to the third party countries, and thereby Bangladeshi goods will become less competitive, right? So Bangladeshi goods overall become less competitive, and it will ultimately impact the Bangladeshi exports to the third party countries, particularly the ready-made goods, because in the financial year 2024 ready-made goods alone have contributed to around 50 billion US dollars worth of exports, right? So ultimately trade would be worst affected by India's move to terminate Bangladesh transshipment facility. So one thing, and the second thing is that Bangladesh would face the logistical shortages, infrastructure adequacy, because as of now Bangladesh is lacking equivalent logistical infrastructure. So it is not having the equivalent logistical infrastructure that could support Bangladesh to export its goods to the third party countries, and it is also not easy for the Bangladesh to develop and upgrade the infrastructure in a very short period of time. So thereby in short term it will impact Bangladesh and the competitiveness of Bangladeshi goods when it is exporting to the other countries as well. And third is market access loss as well. For example, when Bangladeshi goods become less competitive and there is a delay in delivery of Bangladeshi goods, and Bangladesh is not able to export goods on time, of course don't you think that there will be a market access loss that the Bangladesh will likely face? Because under this transshipment facility, India earlier used to provide the Delhi, Kolkata airport access to Bangladesh. Now after termination, Bangladesh cannot access these airports, right, for free of cost. So ultimately the Europe bound or US bound goods will get impacted, and that makes the limited market access or market access loss to the Bangladeshi goods. And it will also have the strategic setback as well, because strategic setback in the sense that it affects Bangladesh positioning as a transit hub and weakens the confidence among the global investors. For example, if global investors are ready to invest in Bangladesh, they are investing in Bangladesh, but this particular move which impact exports from Bangladesh to other third party countries, then no global investors would be ready to come and invest in Bangladesh. So therefore Bangladesh is going to be badly affected by this particular move from the government of India. So what are the implications on government of India by this particular move? So when we talk about the implications, one very important implication is that it actually improves the competitiveness of the ready-made garments from India. So this is the first advantage, and it will also benefit the domestic garment industry or textile industry will get likely benefited from this. And in fact existing transshipment facilities of India could be able to handle exports better, right? So that could cater to the domestic demands, that could even cater to the domestic demand as well, right? So overall it will lead to protecting Indian exports from losing market share in countries like US, Europe, to the Bangladeshi rivals. And ultimately the most important implication would be the diplomatic implication of India withdrawing the transshipment facility to Bangladesh. So diplomatic implication in the sense that this particular move by the government of India could make Bangladesh further strengthen its relations with both China and Pakistan, and that could have the security and strategic implications for India in both short term and long term as well. So however, engagement is very important with respect to Bangladesh, right? So we need to engage with Bangladesh at the multiple levels in the sense that as of now the interim government is in power. So interim government is in power, and interim government also appears that it has adopted the anti-India stance by growing its relations with the Pakistan and China diplomatically. And apart from that, the interim government is also terminating the contracts and agreements that both India and Bangladesh have signed when relations between these two countries were at a very fruitful stage, right? So apart from that, there are different political parties also, right? So political parties in Bangladesh, So in fact, the interim government is formed not based on the elections. So elections were not held in Bangladesh. Rather, this interim government has been held for a temporary period of time. So after 1 or 2 years, there will be elections in Bangladesh. So therefore, India should actually see the long-term political prospects along with engaging this interim government on a short-term basis. So we need to look for the long-term interests in Bangladesh and start engaging with the different political parties in Bangladesh, and that would actually help India maintain its strategic significance in the region and also maintain its influence in Bangladesh as well, right? So India should actually start engaging with the political parties. For example, Bangladeshi nationalist political party in Bangladesh, led by Khaleda Jia. So it should start engaging with such political parties, right? So once it should engage with such political parties, essentially in the sense that India will ensure put a lot of pressure, international pressure, on this interim government to conduct elections. Once elections are held, any of these political parties would comes to power, democratically elected government, and those democratically elected government would have a stable relationship with India as well. So such things have to be done to further improve India's relations with Bangladesh and also limit the influence of countries or external players like China and Pakistan in the region, right? So apart from that, there are other important aspects which have been given with respect to India and Bangladesh relations. So we knew that both India and Bangladesh are close neighbors and they were enjoying a very good relations previously. And similarly, Bangladesh was India's largest trading partner in South Asia, because in financial year 23-24, the bilateral trade reached to 13 billion. And in fact, both have signed land boundary agreement in the year 2015, and India and Bangladesh resolved a decades-long land boundary agreement. And in India, the 100th constitutional amendment has been passed to this respect to resolve the land boundary agreement between these two countries. And there are number of connectivity projects as well, and these connectivity projects are under a strain because of this interim government that has come to power. These connectivity projects are also in question after this government came to power. And in fact, Bangladesh and India are members of SAARC, BIMSTEC, Indian Ocean Rim Association, and even Global Biofuel Alliance as well. However, there are a number of challenges between both India and Bangladesh. The first challenge is geopolitical dynamics, right? So geopolitical dynamics essentially in the sense that there is a growing Chinese influence and presence in the region, and it is particularly concerning that the interim government's chief advisor, Mr. Mohammad Yunus, inviting China to play a larger role in the region. And political uncertainty is also another major reason, because existing government in Bangladesh is not a democratically elected government. This is just an interim government, right? So there is a huge political instability, and there are also fears that there will be again a military rule in Bangladesh, looking into the conditions in Bangladesh. And similarly, there are several regional issues as well, because China has been deepening ties with Bangladesh, and it stops arms market after Pakistan. And Teesta water sharing treaty with Bangladesh is also under question, because there is no consensus over this Teesta water sharing agreement, and infrastructure and connectivity risks are other important issues between the countries of India and Bangladesh. However, it is expected that India would improve its relations with Bangladesh in near future, following both short-term and long-term strategy. The next important topic is the decision of the Reserve Bank of India to cut the repo rate by 25 basis points to 6%. And in fact, in this very monetary policy committee meeting, the RBI has held that the GDP forecast has been lowered to 6.5% owing to the uncertainties, global uncertainties, particularly the trade war that has been taking place, and US President Donald Trump has recently unleashed the tariff war against number of other countries. So this has led to the global uncertainties, and in the backdrop of global uncertainties, India's expected growth rate has been reduced to 6.5%, and RBI has also reduced the repo rate by 25 basis points to settle at 6%. Right. So in this context, we'll understand what exactly is a repo rate, what is expansionary monetary policy, contractionary monetary policy or accommodative stance that has been adopted by the Reserve Bank of India in this recent monetary policy. So we'll try to understand all these important things, and apart from that we will also understand what is a monetary policy committee as well. This is very, very important for your prelims examination and your mains examination as well. So the Reserve Bank of India's monetary policy committee, Reserve Bank of India's monetary policy committee has cut the repo rate by 25 basis points. 25 basis points have been reduced to monetary policy, and ultimately it settled at 6%, and it is lower than, and apart from that, GDP growth rate has also been lowered from earlier 6.7% forecast to just 6.5%. And the reason that the RBI has been given is because of the global uncertainties, particularly because of the trade war between US and China, and tariffs that have been imposed by US president and counter tariffs by other countries as well. And in fact, the Reserve Bank of India in this recent monetary policy committee meeting has also warned that these new tariffs could actually hamper the domestic growth and exports from India. However, the inflation risks in countries like India would remain limited due to the falling commodity and crude oil prices. So there is a decline in the crude oil and commodity prices, and because of that reason the inflation would be under the control, right? So inflation is a sustained increase in the prices of different commodities is considered as inflation, right? So what is a monetary policy? So we'll try to understand briefly about the monetary policy, and then we'll also understand about the monetary policy committee as well. So what exactly is a monetary policy? So it is formed and managed by the Reserve Bank of India. So monetary policy is formed and managed by the Reserve Bank of India, and it actually controls the total money supply, and controls inflation, and maintains stability along with the economic growth. So these are the objectives of the monetary policy of the Reserve Bank of India. So monetary policy is actually different from the fiscal policy, right? So fiscal policy is managed by the Ministry of Finance. So fiscal policy is managed by Ministry of Finance, but monetary policy is managed by the Reserve Bank of India through its monetary policy committee, right? So fiscal policy actually deals with the taxation and the expenditure by the government for any different infrastructure projects or any other expenditures. Now we'll understand what are the key highlights of this monetary policy committee meeting of the Reserve Bank of India, right? So what are the key highlights and important highlights? So we have already understood that the first important highlight is that the Reserve Bank of India has reduced the repo rate by 25 basis points to settle at 6%, and in fact the GDP growth rate forecast has also been lowered by the Reserve Bank of India to 6.5% owing to the global uncertainties like trade war or the tariff war that has been imposed by US on other countries. Now what is a repo rate, right? So what is a repo rate? And there is a reverse repo rate as well. So what exactly is a repo rate? So repo rate is the rate at which the commercial banks take or borrow money from the Reserve Bank of India, right? For example, imagine that the State Bank of India wanted to borrow money from the Reserve Bank of India, right? So Reserve Bank of India lend money to the State Bank of India at a certain rate of interest, and that is what is called as the repo rate. Okay, so repo rate has been reduced in this recent monetary policy committee meeting, and it is also expected that the reduction in the repo rate, a rate cut, would support the economic growth amid increasing global trade tensions, right? So there has been increasing global trade tensions because of the trade war and the tariffs and counter tariffs by the number of countries. So therefore it would result in economic growth in the country, and it would also further increase the global trade. and particularly because of the global tensions, uncertainties arising out of the reciprocal tariffs announced by the US. Now, as of now, inflation in India is largely under control. So inflation in India is largely under control. The reason is declining commodity prices as well as declining crude oil prices. So because of declining commodity prices and crude oil prices, the inflation is largely under control. So if inflation is not under the control, RBI may not have adopted the accommodative monetary policy, right? So RBI may not have been adopted the accommodative monetary policy, but since inflation is under control and there is a need for maintaining the economic growth amid the global uncertainties, RBI has decided to reduce the repo rate, and that will make money cheaper for the banks. And in fact, the Monetary Policy Committee also shifted its stance from the neutral to accommodative. So what does it mean when RBI shifts its stance from neutral to accommodative? It actually means that in future there is a chance that this rate cut would be further continued, and in future also this rate cut would be further reduced. So that is what is called as neutral to accommodative stance. So that means the commercial banks would have credit from the Reserve Bank of India at a much cheaper price, and from the commercial banks the lenders or borrowers can also get money at a lesser or much more cheaper price, and that would result in the investment facility, that would result in investment, because there will be easy access to credit for the investors if RBI adopted this accommodative policy. And what does the neutral stance actually means? This neutral stance gives the Reserve Bank of India or the central bank more and more flexibility to adjust rates based on inflation and economic growth conditions, right? So accommodative stance means it actually focuses on promoting economic growth by lowering interest rates. So therefore, banks would get the money from the Reserve Bank of India at a cheaper price, from the Reserve Bank of India at a cheaper interest rate, and that could also benefit the investors as well, because credit is easily available at a cheaper price. So in contrast, a withdrawal of the accommodation by the Reserve Bank of India aims to control inflation. Now, whenever there is a higher inflationary trend in an economy, RBI would actually withdraw this accommodative stance and increase the repo rate, right? So there will be no more rate cuts by the Reserve Bank of India. Rather, Reserve Bank of India increases the repo rate as well. So this actually leads to the tighter monetary policy. But RBI cutting down the repo rate is part of the expansionary monetary policy. It is also known as expansionary monetary policy. So in fact, Reserve Bank of India governor also clarified that this particular stance, the stance of accommodation, that in future there is a chance of reducing the rate cut or maintaining this rate cuts by the Reserve Bank of India, indicates only two different possibilities. One is either the status quo would be maintained by the Reserve Bank, that means it could be kept at 6%, or further rate cuts around 5.75%, so to that area, right? So this is essentially focuses on promoting economic growth, investment formation in the economy, because as of now economy is not facing any immediate inflationary pressure, right? And apart from the rate cuts, apart from inflation, RBI has also announced the growth forecast. So we have just understood that earlier RBI has given the growth forecast of 6.7% for the financial year 2026. But in this recent Monetary Policy Committee meeting, RBI has reduced the growth forecast to 6.5% because of the global uncertainties, trade war between US and China, and also the tariff issues or tariff conflicts between different countries, right? So there are certain global uncertainties, and those global uncertainties can pose a risk to inflation, right? So they can actually pose risk to inflation through currency pressures, imported inflation, and fall in commodity and crude oil prices is expected to keep the domestic inflation within control. So we have already understood that the lesser commodity prices and even the crude oil prices or declining crude oil prices would actually protect the economy from the inflationary tensions. And the consumer price index inflation forecast for the financial year 26 has also revised by the Reserve Bank of India from 4% to the 4.2%. And in fact, the Reserve Bank of India has also expressed the growth concerns outweigh the inflation worries at present. So the primary concern would be the economic growth. So maintaining the sustained levels of economic growth would be the primary concern as expressed by the Reserve Bank of India. So trade frictions are expected to hurt new investments. It would also hurt the consumption, net exports of different countries, so thereby ultimately impeding the domestic economy as well. And this is what the RBI has held in this recent monetary policy committee meeting. So in fact, what is a monetary policy committee? So we'll try to understand this monetary policy committee. So in fact, the monetary policy committee actually comprises of 6 members, right? So this is a 6-member committee, and within the monetary policy committee, Reserve Bank of India governor is considered as the ex officio chairman of the monetary policy committee. So what is the objective of the monetary policy committee? The objective we have already understood, that they will decide the policy rate required to achieve inflation target. So inflation target that the government has already announced is 4%. Should be the inflation with the lower band of -2%, higher band of +2%, as per the Urjit Patel committee recommendations, right? And in fact, the monetary policy committee has provided under a particular legal framework, section 445ZB of the RBI Act 1935. So under this, central government is empowered to constitute a 6-member monetary policy committee. So monetary policy committee is a 6-member committee, and it has been provided by the Reserve Bank of India Act of 1934. So monetary policy committee is required to meet at least 4 times in a year, right? So they meet 4 times in a year, and each member of the MPC has 1 vote, and in the event of an equality of votes, the governor would have a second vote or a casting vote. And in fact, the monetary policy committee should also submit a report to the government as well, right? So this is about the monetary policy committee, and it is important for the prelims examination. And the next very important topic is global trade crisis and trade war between both China and US, right? So this is also in news in recent times. Particularly, US under President Donald Trump has been indiscriminately imposing tariffs on number of countries, and in fact he also imposed tariffs on India. But again, US has decided to temporarily suspend these tariffs up to 90 days so that US can actually go for the bilateral negotiations between all these countries and not indiscriminately impose tariffs on these countries, because this could likely impact US relations with other friendly countries. So that is very, very important. But despite US temporarily suspended tariffs on number of countries, it continued tariffs on China, because US has imposed 125% of the tariffs on Chinese goods, right? And in fact, this particular move by the US President Donald Trump has appeared a shift in the broader trade conflict into a direct US and China standoff. So despite a temporary suspension of these tariffs on number of countries, US President Donald Trump has announced 125% tariffs on Chinese imports into US, and this could likely result in a direct US-China standoff, not just a trade war between US and China. And in fact, countries included in the tariff pause for 90 days will now face a 10% of the tariff, because US has now been trying to engage with these countries through the individual negotiations, right? And in fact, you can also go through this for other details, because US hits back, raising tariffs on Chinese goods by 125%, up from 104% earlier in the day. And in fact, US pauses most new tariffs on 90 days, maintaining 10% tariff on all countries. So in this context, we'll understand how US imposing tariffs on China would impact Chinese competitiveness, Chinese exports, and US and China relations in a very detailed manner, right? So we have understood that there will be a 90 days pause on different countries and their imports into US. So US will be imposing 10% tariffs on number of countries, because US would like to go to individual negotiations with these number of countries except China. So a full-scale trade conflict is looming because President Trump threatens 100% of tariff on Chinese goods, effectively creating a trade embargo, right? So this would likely impact the bilateral trade between both US and China. Now, one thing that we should understand here is that if you look at the bilateral trade between both US and China, it amounts to around more than 500 billion US dollars, but the trade balance is heavily in favor of China. So China is actually enjoying a huge trade surplus with its trade with US, and that is the one reason why US has been imposing more tariffs on Chinese goods. So this could actually this move could actually spark a dangerous decoupling between world's largest economies of both China and US. And in fact, China and US, the first and second largest economies in the world, and this could lead to the direct escalation of their relations, and this is also considered as a trade war between these two countries. Right. So in fact, Trump is open to negotiations with other countries as well, but in the long term, the impact of this policy would gambles its uncertain, right? And in fact, if you look at the US-China trade in terms of data, as I have already told you, that the total bilateral trade between US and China is 582 billion US dollars, 582 billion US dollars, and out of this 582 billion dollars, US exports to China stands at 143 billion dollars. So 143 billion dollars US exports to China, and US imports from China stands at 438 billion US dollars, 438 billion US dollars, right? So it is around 2.8% increase from 2023 levels. And in fact, if you look at the number of countries with which USA had trade relations, and in fact, so China alone accounting for 28% of the 550 billion total trade shock to US, right? So 28% of trade is with the China, right? So in this context, China would be worst impacted with these tariffs, and US experiences a trade deficit for approximately 295 billion with its trade with China, and 1% of its GDP, right? So this actually amounts to 1% of GDP of US, contrary to Trump exaggerated 1 trillion claim of trade deficit with China. And in fact, so how this is going to affect China. So the tariffs announced by US President Donald Trump, so how it is going to impact China. So US actually imports far more from China. So US actually import a lot of goods from China rather than what US exports to China. And because of this reason, when US imposes 100% tariffs on Chinese goods, Chinese exports to US would be worst affected, first thing. The second thing is that Chinese economy is still dependent on its exports to other countries rather than the domestic consumption, right? So it is not substantially dependent on the domestic consumption, rather it has depended on exporting its goods to the other countries. And this could likely impact the Chinese economy in the short term. The second thing is that Chinese strategic advantages compared to US. Just China also enjoying certain strategic advantages. The first is China has the political stability. So it has the political stability because unlike Donald Trump, who is largely unpredictable and uncertain, Xi Jinping actually faces no elections. So there will be no elections in China, and he is declared as a lifetime president. So no elections, and there is no significant internal opposition for Xi Jinping. And in fact, if you look at the domestic economic planning, as China is planning to rolling out the stimulus package combining with fiscal and monetary measures, and that would potentially reverse the weak domestic consumption in China. And China is also planning to adopt a long-term strategy, that is, so Beijing can continue the fiscal stimulus longer, and it could strengthen domestic consumption, and that could actually absorb the surplus if exports dip from China, right? So these are the strategies that China would likely adopt in this context. So however, US is having certain weaknesses. So what weaknesses that US having? Now, one weakness is that Donald Trump is uncertain and unpredictable, and in fact Americans are also heavily dependent on Chinese imports. So if you look at the trade deficit between US and China, you can imagine how worst dependent US is on Chinese cheap goods. So therefore US is heavily dependent on Chinese clothing, shoes, electronics. So this tariffs on Chinese goods will be passed on to the consumers, especially affecting the low income groups as well, right? So this is how US impacts with the tariffs, and China also impacts with the tariffs as well, and this without a doubt will lead to the direct confrontation between the two largest economies in the world. And next important topic is modernization of command area development and water management. So in this context, we'll understand the scheme, the umbrella scheme, Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana, providing irrigation to every field with the theme per drop more crop. And as part of this umbrella program, recently the government has decided to revive the command area development program under modernization of command area development and water management, right? So this is a sub scheme under the Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana, and it will be implemented in the financial year 25-26 with the total financial outlay of around 1,600 crore rupees, right? So this has been recently approved by the Union Cabinet. Now, what is the purpose of this particular program? Is irrigation, water availability, increasing agri productivity or farm productivity are some objectives of this command area development and water management program. And for this particular program, the union government has allocated 1,600 crore rupees, right? So there are different ministries and different departments which actually implement different programs. For example, Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, so it implements the micro irrigation program and achieving the objective of per drop more crop. And Ministry of Water Resources also implements some programs such as accelerated irrigation benefits program, command area development and water management program, repair, renovation, restoration of water bodies program, minor irrigation of surface and groundwater. So this is again Har Khet Ko Pani. And Ministry of Rural Development implements watershed management program and National Rural Employment Guarantee scheme with the focus on watershed development. So all these different schemes are connected with one umbrella scheme, that is Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana, right? So what is this Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana and when it was launched and what are its objectives? So Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana is considered as a comprehensive umbrella national irrigation scheme. It was launched in the year 2015. So when it was launched in the year 2015, and in fact the overall objective of the Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana is to expand the irrigation coverage to agri fields and also improving the efficiency of water use at a farm level, right? So this is in line with Har Khet Ko Pani, per drop more crop. So number of ministries are involved, and that makes the implementation of this scheme a possibility. The ministries which involved including Ministry of Jal Shakti, Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare and Ministry of Rural Development. So what are the objectives of Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana? So it actually has a set of objectives. They include ensuring convergence of investments in irrigation at the grassroots level and achieving the target of Har Khet Ko Pani or water for every field, and also promote water saving irrigation methods like drip irrigation, sprinkler irrigation, which are part of the micro irrigation methods under per crop more crop, so more drop per drop more crop, and conserve water and also encourage the reuse of treated wastewater in peri-urban agriculture regions, right? This is under the Har Khet Ko Pani program. Now, in fact, we'll try to understand modernization of command area development and water management program. So in fact, this modernization of command area development and water management program is part of Ministry of Jal Shakti, and it is formulated under the umbrella program of Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana. and it focuses on modernization of irrigation networks using digital and pressure irrigation technologies. Right, so when it was launched in the year April 2025, and originally it was part of the Command Area Development Program launched in 1974 and 75. And what are the objectives of the modernization of Command Area Development and Water Management Program? So because it has a set of objectives, the first objective is that increased utilization, created irrigation potential, and also enhance the water use efficiency of farms, and promoting the sustainable agricultural practices across different agriculture regions. And similarly, develop underground pressurized piped irrigation systems for water delivery of up to 1 hectare of farm. So essentially ensuring self-sufficiency in irrigation, improving the productivity, and promoting micro irrigation techniques, drip irrigation, sprinkler irrigation methods, and also watershed development programs and water use efficiency such as per drop, more crop, har khet ko pani. So all these programs would be implemented as part of the umbrella scheme Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sanchai Yojana. And apart from that, the other objectives include employing supervisory control and data acquisition systems and Internet of Things technologies for real-time water accounting and monitoring, and transfers irrigation asset management to water user societies to ensure more and more sustainability of water management. And it could also facilitate partnerships among the water use societies and farmer producer organizations, as well as the primary agricultural and credit cooperative societies. And even it also aims to attract rural youth into the agriculture through modern water management practices. So these are the set of objectives of revived Command Area Development and Water Management Program that has been announced by the Union Cabinet in April 2025. So anyway, that's all in this class, and thank you so much. So please subscribe our YouTube channel and also hit the like button. Thank you.